Cade Cunningham has always approached basketball with a patience that feels out of place in the modern NBA. While the league keeps pushing faster, louder, and more chaotic styles of play, he slows everything down and plays within the spaces other players rush past. Watching him feels less like chasing highlights and more like listening to jazz. The tempo is deliberate, the pauses matter, and the control is constant. In an era built on non-stop motion and spectacle, Cade has quietly become one of the most ethical players in the game. Every movement has purpose, and nothing ever feels wasted. That approach has turned him into one of the smartest and most impactful players in basketball, an all-NBA lock, a legitimate MVP candidate, the face of a Pistons franchise that went from historically broken to genuinely respected. And yeah, I gotta admit, Cade is my lock screen, and as a Pistons fan, I've lived through the jokes. I sat through the longest losing streak in NBA history, wondering how it all went so wrong. So when I say this turnaround feels unreal, it's because I know how impossible it once felt. What makes Cade's rise different is that it never came with chaos. There was no moment where the league collectively gasped and crowned him overnight. His rise happened quietly, shaped by responsibility arriving earlier than it ever should, by pressure that never made headlines, and by a personality that never begged for attention. For most of his life, that quiet confidence was misunderstood. His game was labeled as safe. His demeanor was labeled boring. Even now, there's voices who swear this story can't last, who argue stars don't stay in places like Detroit, who see markets and narratives instead of people.
As a Detroit Pistons fan, you should be worried.
But that exact thinking completely misses who Cade Cunningham really is, because this story was never about flash or hype. It was about control, about patience, about carrying weight without making a sound. Cade didn't just help end a losing streak. He reshaped the entire environment. He changed expectations. He brought stability to a franchise that hadn't felt steady in decades. And to understand how someone this composed could shoulder that kind of responsibility, you can't start with the NBA. You can't start with the draft or the awards or even the debates. You have to go back. You have to start with the kid who learned how to move through life without rushing, even when life forced him to grow up earlier than anyone around him.
Only the beginning, the tip of the iceberg. I'm excited though, man. It's gonna be a long journey ahead, but I'm excited for it.
Before Detroit ever asked him to fix something broken, Cade Cunningham was just a kid growing up in Arlington, Texas, surrounded by nothing but competition. His household didn't treat sports like a fantasy. It treated them like a discipline. His father, Keith Cunningham, had played college football, and his mother, Carrie, was a former professional tennis player. Winning games in this house mattered, but preparation mattered much more. Cade wasn't raised to chase attention. He was raised to understand responsibility. You showed up, you worked, you carried yourself the right way. And from the beginning, Cade stood out not because he demanded the ball, but because he understood what to do with it. He played multiple sports as a kid, including football, where he learned how to read space, anticipate movement, and stay composed under pressure. That quarterback mentality would never leave him. He wasn't the fastest or the loudest kid on the floor, but his teammates trusted him. Coaches trusted him. The game made sense to him in a way that felt instinctive. The competition never stopped. His older brother Cannon was relentless. Backyard games weren't playful. They were demanding. And Cade learned quickly that if he wanted respect, he had to earn it. No shortcuts or sympathy for being younger. He had to learn it the hard way. And that environment forced him to mature early. He learned how to compete without emotion taking over. And by the time he reached Bowie High School, that calm had already become a part of his identity.
My dad wakes up at 4 a.m. every morning. So I think if I could make it for him and for the rest of my family so that they can, sleep in and, just live a great life.
As a freshman, Cade didn't ease his way into varsity basketball. He walked straight into it. Playing against older, stronger players didn't rattle him. If anything, it slowed him down. While other teenagers tried to prove themselves, Cade focused on controlling the game. He scored when he needed to. He passed when it mattered more. He played like someone who already understood that high school basketball was just another step, not the destination. What's important here is not the points or the wins. It's how people described Cade, even at 14 and 15 years old.
He does stay in the gym. He's got great work ethic. He is a leader of our team.
Poised, safe, reliable. The words followed him, and these were all compliments. Technically, but not the kind of compliments that turns kids into stars. There really weren't any viral moments in high school. No mixtape culture chasing him. His game couldn't be clipped into 15 seconds. Instead, it demanded you to watch the whole thing. And for a lot of people, that read as boring. But inside Cade's own circle, something else was happening. Cade was growing faster than the people around him realized. Not just physically, but how he processed pressure. When Cade got hurt as a sophomore, he didn't panic. Instead, he rehabbed. And when he returned, he kept moving forward. That steadiness became his trademark long before anyone attached a label to it. Even off the court, he wasn't chasing any attention. He was comfortable letting other people talk. And eventually, it became very clear to Cade and his family that Arlington just wasn't big enough for what he was becoming. Quick side note, I know you hear every YouTuber say this, but 97% of you guys are not subscribed. So if you can just do me a huge favor, take 1 second out of your day and hit that sub button. My goal is 100,000 subs and I cannot do it without you. And if you're enjoying this video, you may as well drop a like, right? It helps me way more than you could think. And be sure to check out our podcast channel where we cover daily NBA news that's happening all season long. That channel will be linked down below, as well as our Discord server, Twitter, and Twitch stream, where we do these podcasts live at 9 a.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday. Let's get back to the video. The decision to leave home for Montverde Academy wasn't about chasing hype. It was about testing himself. It meant leaving his family, his routine, and the comfort of familiarity. For Cade, comfort had never been the goal. Growth was. And Montverde represented the hardest environment he could step into without skipping any steps. This was basically college before college. That single move marked the end of his childhood phase. Not because he stopped being young, but because life was about to speed up in ways basketball never could. At 16 years old, Cade Cunningham packed up and moved over 1,000 miles away from home to attend Montverde Academy, a place designed to test whether elite prospects actually belonged among the elite. This was not a gym, it was a factory. Every practice felt like an evaluation. Every game felt like a national audition. Cade wasn't walking in as the future face of anything yet. He was walking into a locker room filled with other 5-star talent, players who had been told their entire lives that they were special. And from the outside, Cade fit right in. On the court, he adjusted immediately. His first major showcase performance announced that the calm translated at this level too. Bigger defenders didn't speed him up. Faster guards didn't knock him off his rhythm. He controlled games without forcing them, and coaches trusted him almost instantly to run the offense. It was also at this time where Cade Cunningham decided to go vegan. And even to this day, he stayed true to that diet.
And I decided to go vegan just for the health benefits. I feel like I get sick a lot less. My body feels a lot more clean. I feel a lot more energetic since I started veganism.
But Montverde didn't reward flash. It rewarded control. And that played directly into who Cade already was. By his junior and senior seasons, Cade wasn't just thriving. He was anchoring one of the most dominant high school teams the sport had ever seen. The roster was stacked with future NBA players like Scotty Barnes. Yet Cade became the connective tissue and let the team overwhelm opponents collectively. And that choice mattered a lot.
2020 Montverde. That's Cade in them, right? That's Cade in them? Cade in all them?
Team, yeah, that team was tough.
Because while others hunted moments, Cade was building habits. He was learning how to lead without speeches, how to command without noise, and how to matter without being loud. The national media noticed, even if fans didn't always understand it. And as his accolades piled up, awards followed. He became the consensus top player in his class. And still, the same words followed him. Safe, controlled, boring. Off the court, however, the adjustment was far harder. This was the first time Cade had ever been truly away from his family. No daily routines, no parents in the stands, no familiar support system waiting when things felt off. For a teenager who had always been surrounded by structure, Montverde introduced isolation in a way basketball never had. Then life decided to intervene. Not long after arriving in Florida, Cade experienced loss for the first time. And that grief followed him into a place where he didn't yet feel settled.
I go through like the first death ever. I've never had nobody in my family, nobody around me die. You know what I mean? 2 more deaths. Wow. So it's 3 of them.
Family members passed away in close succession. Before Cade even had time to process all of that, another reality hit even harder. His ex-girlfriend back in Texas was pregnant. At 17 years old, thousands of miles away from home, Cade suddenly had to confront a question that most teenagers never faced. What does responsibility look like now? He recently said at that moment that basketball felt fragile. For the first time ever, the dream didn't feel guaranteed. The thought crossed his mind that he might need to just walk away from basketball, go home, and become a father first. Not because he lacked belief in himself, but because that's how seriously he took the situation. He knew a lot of people he grew up with that just gave up their dreams to be a father.
I'm thinking, I gotta go back to the crib now and be a dad. Hoop is done for me.
This is where the people around him really mattered. His parents stepped in. Not to make decisions for him, but to remind him that responsibility doesn't always mean retreat. They reassured him thousands of times that he could pursue his future and still show up as a father. That support from his family reframed everything. Cade didn't harden like most would. He focused. The game didn't become less important. It became purposeful. From that point on, Montverde wasn't just a basketball stop. It was a preparation for real life. I think you can already tell that I'm a major Cade fan. And because of that, I've been collecting as much stuff of his as I can. But I didn't just want some plain old merch. I wanted something tied to real moments. That's why I went to Topps Now. Here's how it works. Think of a big NBA moment. Whatever moment you're thinking of, they could have a card of it, printed on demand and shipped directly to you. Let me show you a couple from earlier in the season. Here's the game winner that Kevin Durant hit over the Phoenix Suns on January 5th. And here's Devin Booker hitting the game winner against the Oklahoma City Thunder. Some of the cards will include an auto or relic to chase. So if you buy the base card, you have a shot at the big hit. For example, check out this Nikola Jokic card. It was from Christmas Day where Nikola Jokic became the first ever player to drop 55 points, 15 assists, and 15 rebounds all in one game. And I gotta let y'all know that these cards are only available for 48 hours after it happens, so you gotta act pretty quick. Be sure to hit the link down in the description and check out Topps now. Let's build our collection together. Huge thanks to Topps for sponsoring this video. He finished his high school career undefeated, as the leader of a historically dominant team and as the clear top prospect in the country. But more importantly, he left Montverde as a changed man, quieter and more intentional, more aware that every decision now carried weight beyond himself. By the time his daughter was born, Cade wasn't just choosing a college. He was choosing to stay close, to build stability, and to be present in a way that mattered beyond basketball. When Cade Cunningham's high school career ended, the basketball world expected a predictable next step. Programs like North Carolina, Duke, ready to fold him into systems that had already produced stars for decades. The blueprint was familiar, and for most prospects, irresistible. But Cade wasn't making just a normal decision. Basketball wasn't the only thing shaping his future. His daughter had been born, and suddenly geography and presence mattered most. Cade had already spent too much of her first year growing up watching her through a phone screen, and he wasn't willing to repeat that if he had a choice. And that's where Oklahoma State entered the picture. On paper, it didn't make sense to a lot of people. Oklahoma State wasn't a national powerhouse. It didn't offer the same spotlight or the same built-in margin for error as the blue blood schools chasing him. But what it did offer was something Cade valued more than brand recognition: proximity to his family. Stillwater was close enough to Arlington for his family to stay involved, close enough for his daughter to be in the gym, close enough for basketball to coexist with fatherhood instead of competing with it. And then there was his brother. Cade Cunningham wasn't just Cade's older sibling. He had been his first real teacher, his toughest competition, and his most honest voice. When Oklahoma State hired Cannon into the coaching staff, it gave Cade something no program ever could. Someone who knew him beyond just the rankings, beyond expectations, and beyond the pressure. That mattered a lot more to Cade than people realized. And once the season started, that fit became obvious. From the opening night, Cade played with a sense of command that didn't look like freshman energy. He didn't hunt shots to prove a point. He controlled all the possessions. He closed games. He made Oklahoma State relevant in spaces they hadn't occupied in years. There were moments that forced the country to pay attention. Late game takeovers, big shots in hostile gyms, a 40-point night that felt less like a breakout and more like a confirmation. Cade didn't just belong at the college level. He was dictating it. And by the end of that season, the awards followed. Player of the Year, Freshman of the Year, All-American. Words that finally matched what the tape had been saying all along. But the most important thing that happened that year didn't show up on a stat sheet. Cade was present. His daughter was in the stands. His family was around. Basketball success and personal responsibility weren't fighting for space anymore. They were feeding each other. The same calm that defined his game now had context. When Cade declared for the NBA draft, it was because he had built something stable enough to leave. And that very stability would be tested next.
I can't wait to see you at draft night, Daddy.
Come on,
I can't
bro.
wait
Come
to
on.
see you at
Come on.
draft
Get 'em out.
night,
How I get
Daddy.
'em out? How I get 'em out? How I
Yeah,
get 'em out?
bro. I
How
hope
get
you
'em
gonna
out?
know.
How I get 'em out? How I get 'em out?
By the time the 2021 NBA draft arrived, Cade Cunningham wasn't just a top prospect. He was the prospect. For over a year, scouts had described him the same way they always had: safe, polished, high floor, franchise guard, the kind of player you could build around without worrying about volatility. And Detroit didn't hesitate.
With the first pick in the 2021 NBA draft, the Detroit Pistons select Cade Cunningham.
I love you more than life itself, sorry.
The Pistons chose Cade Cunningham, not because he was the loudest option, but because they believed he was the most dependable one. Where other teams debated upside, athleticism, or defensive versatility, Detroit saw control. They saw someone who could organize chaos instead of adding to it. And that choice wasn't unanimous across the league. Some evaluators preferred Evan Mobley's defensive ceiling, Jalen Green's offensive spark. Others gravitated towards Scotty Barnes' energy and physical tools. There were real voices who questioned whether Cade's game would scale in a league obsessed with speed and explosion. The same concerns followed him yet again. Would his patience translate, or would it get swallowed?
You don't get this day too many times. I've been dreaming about this my whole life, so I'm happy to be here.
Detroit bet that it would translate, and before Cade Cunningham ever arrived, Detroit basketball had already fallen from a place most franchises never reach. This was once the home of the Bad Boys, a team that turned physicality into an identity and intimidation into an art form. Then came the best five alive, anchored by Big Ben Wallace, a group that didn't rely on superstardom but built something stronger: trust, sacrifice, and a defense that suffocated entire arenas. Detroit wasn't just winning championships. It imposed the standards. You knew what Pistons basketball meant. And then, almost quietly, that meaning disappeared. The stars aged out, the core fractured, the league changed, and Detroit never found its footing again. What followed wasn't a clean rebuild or a clear reset. It was a slow bleed. Bad contracts, missed picks, directionless seasons that felt disconnected from the franchise's past. For us fans who grew up on that gritty identity, the fall was jarring. I was a kid during that stretch, running through school hallways convincing myself and anyone who would listen that Rodney Stuckey and Greg Monroe were the next Kobe and Shaq. That belief wasn't delusion, it was desperation. When you grow up watching Ben Wallace erase stars and Chauncey Billups control games, you cling to whatever hope you can.
Detroit, I'm all the way in. Detroit Pistons, I'm all the way in. Let's do it.
Cade's rookie season didn't explode onto the scene. Instead, it sort of whispered at you. He played 64 games, averaging roughly 17 points, 6 assists, and 5 rebounds per night. Numbers that reflect a responsibility more than freedom. He wasn't protected. He wasn't eased in. He was handed the keys to a young roster and asked to make sense of all of it. There were some flashes. There were some big nights. Moments where it was obvious that he saw things others didn't. But the wins didn't come. And for a player drafted first overall, patience is rarely afforded when the standings don't move. Then came year 2. Cade's body betrayed him. A stress fracture in his left shin shut him down for the year after just 12 appearances. Another season lost. Another delay added to a rebuild that already felt so fragile. Through 2 years, the narrative had already begun to turn. First overall picks aren't allowed to disappear, and Cade had disappeared twice, once into losses and once into injury. The 23-24 season was supposed to be a reset. Instead, it became a collapse. By the time Cade returned, the expectations hadn't softened. If anything, they sharpened. The Pistons started the season 2-1. Then out of nowhere, Detroit spiraled into the longest losing streak in NBA history. 28 straight games, night after night. It all ended with the same result over and over again.
Yeah, we're not 2-26 bad. You know what I mean? Like, no way are we that bad.
What made the 28-game losing streak feel unbearable wasn't just the number. It was how close Detroit came to escaping it almost every single night. These weren't 40-point blowouts. These were games the Pistons controlled for long stretches. Double-digit leads evaporated late. Defensive coverages broke down in the final minutes. Offensive flow disappeared when it mattered the most. The same movie played on repeat, and Cade was in the middle of all of it. He was asked to initiate, create, close, and lead through dysfunction that would have broken louder players. He absorbed the pressure. He made the right reads and watched those reads fail him anyway. Night after night, he took the blame that should have been shared. The frustration wasn't about talent. It was about the decision-making above him. Detroit had paid for stability. Instead, they got confusion. Monty Williams arrived as the highest paid coach in NBA history, hired to bring order into this chaos. What followed was the exact opposite. Rotations never settled. Roles shifted constantly, and most glaring of all, Monty repeatedly opted to play Killian Hayes over Jaden Ivey, even as the offenses stagnated and spacing collapsed. Late game lineups shrank the floor around Cade. Momentum died possession by possession. The Pistons were not just losing, they were sabotaging themselves in real time. Eventually, the bill came due. Monty Williams was fired, paid the rest of his contract, and his tenure was remembered less for the leadership and more for what it wasted. But by then, the damage was already done. All anyone saw was the record. All anyone was talking about was the losing streak. All anyone talked about was the #1 pick.
They are 4-45. 4-45.
The discourse turned fast. Cade was suddenly inefficient, suddenly passive, suddenly a mistake. The same calm that once read as maturity now got framed as a lack of fire. Analysts started throwing around the word that no top pick ever wants attached to their name: bust. Not quietly either, loudly, confidently, as if context didn't exist, as if injuries didn't matter, as if development happens in a straight line.
That Detroit made the wrong pick at #1, taking Cade Cunningham.
By the end of that stretch, Cade Cunningham had gone from franchise savior to cautionary tale in the span of just 2 seasons. A player once described as the safest bet in his class was now treated like a sunk cost.
I'm kind of sick right now. I am sick right now.
And through all of it, he didn't change. No public frustration, no excuses, no finger pointing. He showed up, he played, he bared that weight. Because Cade had already learned something the league was just now discovering. Patience looks a lot like losing before it starts to look like winning. What nobody realized at the time was that this stretch wasn't breaking him, it was strengthening him. And the season that followed would make that impossible to ignore. By By the time the 2024-25 season arrived, most people around the league had already made up their minds. Detroit was broken. Cade was damaged. Whatever progress that existed was fragile at best.
You know, and a night we playing, don't mean to disrespect them, but the Detroit Pistons, who have struggled over the last year or two, you know, we're going to play through Peyton, let him go for 30. And play through Sam, let him shoot 10 threes tonight. We're going to still win the game.
Then, everything changed. The Pistons did not fix themselves overnight, but for the first time in years, their decisions made sense. Veteran help arrived, not as saviors, but as stabilizers. Tobias Harris brought professionalism and scoring gravity. Malik Beasley gave them shooting and edge. Tim Hardaway Jr. added spacing and shot making that Detroit simply hadn't had. None of these were flashy moves, but they were the intentional ones. And then came the most important change of them all.
Some breaking news right now. What do you have?
Yeah, just then I'm told that the Detroit Pistons are hiring JB Bickerstaff as their next head coach.
From the moment he took over, the tone shifted. Bickerstaff didn't try to reinvent Detroit. He leaned right into it. Defense mattered again. Accountability mattered again. Roles were clear. The Pistons stopped playing like a collection of prospects and started playing like a team that understood its history. The echoes of old Detroit didn't feel forced. They felt familiar, and the results were impossible to ignore.
Bam fights through the screen. Cunningham gets the ball against Bam. Pulls up for the win. Got it! Detroit basketball!
After winning just 14 games the year before, for the first time in NBA history, the Pistons more than tripled their win total. Night after night, they competed. Cade wasn't just surviving anymore. He was steering. The same patience that once got him labeled boring now dictated games. He controlled tempo, punished mistakes, and closed games with authority.
5 seconds to shoot. Durant sagged on Cade, and he buries the three.
Then adversity tried to test them again.
Certainly by Cole Anthony, but Jaden Ivey's in a lot of pain.
Midway through the season, on January 1st, Jaden Ivey went down with an injury. For a young team, that should have been the breaking point. Instead, it became fuel. Detroit tightened the rotation. The ball moved more. The purpose sharpened. When most people counted them out, they somehow played even better than before, using this loss as motivation instead of an excuse. By the end of the season, Detroit wasn't just respectable, they were back in the playoffs.
Pistons heading to the playoffs for the first time since 2019.
Tomorrow we go back to work because we're still fighting for more.
Come on, man.
All right, let's go.
The matchup was New York, a physical, experienced team built for moments exactly like this. The series went to 6 games, and it was closer than the final result suggests. Possession swung on missed calls. Momentum flipped on whistles that never came. Detroit didn't get through, but they belonged. It was by far the closest series of the entire playoffs. Almost every game came down to a single possession. And for the first time since 2008, Pistons fans watched playoff basketball that felt alive again. For me, it was personal. I'm from Detroit, but I live in North Carolina now, and I made sure I flew back for games 3 and 4.
MVP! MVP! MVP!
I'll never forget the sound in that building, man. An arena full of fans who had waited over a decade for a reason to believe again, screaming for a team that finally gave them one. I unfortunately didn't get to see a win in person, but somehow that didn't matter because the feeling that I haven't felt since I was 10 years old was finally back.
The Pistons end the longest losing streak in NBA playoff history. They win their first postseason game since 2008.
The turnaround wasn't just visible in the standings. It showed up unmistakably in Cade's game. Cade Cunningham took the leap that everyone said he couldn't. He played 70 games, averaging 26 points, 9 assists, and 6 rebounds per night. Numbers that finally reflected both the responsibility he carried and the control he'd always played with. The efficiency caught up to the difficulty. The reads came faster. The fourth quarters belonged to him. The league also noticed. Cade was named the first-time All-Star, a moment that felt overdue rather than just surprising. By the season's end, he earned All-NBA third team, official recognition that he wasn't just leading a comeback. He was now one of the best guards in basketball. And when MVP ballots were released, his name wasn't an afterthought. Cade finished 7th in MVP voting, a quiet but undeniable signal that what was happening in Detroit was real. This wasn't just a feel-good story anymore. It was production, impact, and consistency stacked over an entire season. The same player that had once been labeled safe and boring had become unavoidable. What happened next wasn't supposed to happen this fast. Around the league, the assumption was simple. Detroit would regress. The magic would wear off. Last season would be remembered as a great story, but not a real turning point. Young teams aren't supposed to flip a switch and stay there. Well, lucky for them, Detroit didn't flip a switch. They kept building. A quarter of the way into the 2025-26 season, the Pistons weren't sneaking up on anyone anymore. They were controlling games, dictating pace, walking into arenas and leaving with wins that felt routine. Cade Cunningham wasn't playing like someone trying to prove last year wasn't a fluke. He's playing like someone who had already moved past that conversation. This was the season where dominance replaced surprise. Cade's numbers climbed again, but more importantly, his control was even more impressive. He was scoring at will when defenses leaned too far, punishing mismatches without forcing shots, and carving teams apart with his passing when they tried to load up on him. He's firmly in the top 3 of the MVP race, not as a narrative pick, but as a nightly reality. Detroit wasn't winning because Cade was hot. They were winning because he was consistent. And then came the most impressive stretch of this season so far. Detroit ripped off 13 straight wins, tying a franchise record that had only been reached twice before. Both of those times, banners followed. The Bad Boys did it. The Best Five Alive did it. History doesn't repeat itself often in Detroit, but when it does, it carries weight. The wins came in different ways. Defensive slugfests, late game executions, blowouts that were over by halftime. Detroit doesn't look like a team riding momentum. They look like a team built to sustain it. And what makes this more impressive is what they've endured along the way. This season has not been clean. Injuries hit again. Lineups shuffled. Jaden Ivey, coming off of what was shaping up to be a career year before last season's injury, is being eased back carefully. There were nights where Detroit had every excuse to stall, but they didn't. Instead of folding, the roster adapted. Losing Malik Beasley still lingered, but the front office answered it. Duncan Robinson stretched defense in ways Detroit hadn't seen in years. Karis LeVert brought calm when games tilted. A week before camp, Javonte Green arrived and fit in immediately. Defense, effort, toughness, Detroit basketball. Then came the internal growth. Jalen Duren took a leap that changed the floor itself. Stronger, smarter, dominant on the glass, forcing teams to pick their poison between him or Cade. Asar Thompson quietly beginning to shape himself into one of the league's best defenders, swallowing primary options and setting the tone early. Isaiah Stewart and Ron Holland gave Detroit its edge back. Grit, intensity, and a refusal to be pushed around. This didn't look like a young team anymore. It looked like Detroit, not by copying the past, but by honoring it. Defense mattered, toughness mattered, roles mattered, and at the center of it all, it was Cade Parker Cunningham, doing what he's always done, slowing the room down, carrying weight without noise, and making winning feel methodical instead of chaotic. At this point, nobody's laughing anymore. The Pistons aren't just a feel-good story or a small sample surprise. They're real. And for the first time in a long time, Detroit wasn't chasing the league. The league is trying to catch up to them.
This season is not about winning the MVP for me, though. This season is about winning finals more than anything. A finals MVP, I'd be way more happy about.
After everything we've watched, one thing is clear. Cade Cunningham was never supposed to save basketball at Detroit overnight. He was never built for shortcuts or spectacle. What we learned about Cade through all of this is that his greatest trait has never been flash. It's endurance, the ability to carry weight, absorb noise, and keep moving forward without losing himself in the process. That's why this story feels so different. I'm not sitting here telling you that this year the Pistons are going to win it all. I'm not crowning anything early, but what matters most is that the Pistons are already ahead of schedule, and they got there the right way, through growth, through patience, through a leader who never panicked when the world told him to. And yeah, believe me, I see all the tweets. I see people saying, who cares that the Pistons are the #1 seed? Who cares what happens in December? Who cares if it's real yet? Pistons fans care. All we've wanted for nearly 2 decades is to walk into Little Caesars Arena and feel something again. To watch meaningful basketball in April. To see this team win a playoff game at home. Better yet, to finally win a playoff series for the first time in 18 years. That's the bar now. And there's nothing wrong with that, because what Pistons fans have endured is not normal. Years of losing, years of false hope, years of convincing ourselves that the next pick, the next coach, the next season would finally be the one. We've watched the rest of the league pass us up while we held on to memories of Ben Wallace, Chauncey Billups, and what Detroit basketball used to mean. And now, for the first time in a long time, we're waking up and smiling. Not because banners are guaranteed, not because the journey is over, but because this team has finally given us something real to believe in. Something sustainable, something led by a player who never needed to announce himself. Cade Cunningham doesn't play like a superstar chasing validation. He plays like someone who already understands the responsibility that comes with it. Smooth, patient, in control. The same way he's always moved through the game. Detroit didn't get saved by some savior. It got steadied by a leader. The most boring prospect of his generation didn't light the league on fire. He put it in a headlock and never let go. He's a smooth operator who knows how to slow the room down, tough enough to survive everything that tried to break him. That's Cade Cunningham, and that's... If you enjoyed, please don't forget to drop a like, subscribe, and check out our podcast channel, Jay-Z Courtside, where we upload daily NBA content Monday through Friday. Oh, and you see the videos that are on the screen right now? Go check them out. I think you'll love them. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.